Hey everybody, welcome back to another great episode of the Red, White, U Show with yours truly, the military medium. Today I have a really great guest. She is a wife, a mom, I forgot to add a wife of a Navy sailor, a Army vet herself. She served in the ROTC, and she's got a really cool story to share about coming back from injury and adversity and everything else. But she has so many things. She has a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in human behavior, certified in Pilates. We're going to get to all that here in a minute. But I want to introduce my friend Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
What really intrigued me is when I saw your stuff, and we were just talking before we came live, is kind of how we kind of are intermixed into our own immersive worlds, so to speak, right? And it's kind of funny when you start talking with other people that have similar likes or interests. It's like, oh my God, you know so-and-so? And it's like you're in similar bubbles, even though you're in San Diego and I'm all the way out in North Dakota. But regardless, the world is a small place.
It really is.
It really is.
And by the way, when you read through my bio, you make me sound real fancy, Dean, and I'm not that like we're not that fancy over here. Well, I'm the curious learner. I have to keep going.
Well, I to that extent, I really do want to read some of your credentials because I do believe that it lends some credibility and also applicability into what we're talking today. You got a bachelor's, like I said, in psychology and a master's in human behavior, certified in Pilates, above bar, CrossFit, and paleo nutrition, California State certified in domestic violence and a counselor, and have certifications in group and individual crisis intervention. Mm-hmm. So you got a lot of stuff going on. You work with a lot of great clients. Yes. But take us back a little bit in time, back before you became the wife, the mom, a little bit about your time in art. We were talking about that, mm-hmm. and kind of how this whole journey started and how you went from there.
I think my journey started the way a lot of people's journey started. I was a senior in high school and I wanted to go to college. I knew what I wanted to do. And my parents said, you need to find a way to pay for college. So I took the ASVAB. And that was it. All of a sudden, I had recruiters calling me. And it was like predominantly the Marine Corps and the Army. And quite frankly, the Marine Corps terrified the fuck out of me. So I was like, let's talk to the Army instead. And that's how that happened. So I had been talking with recruiters and everything, and they were like, look, your ASVAB score is so high that what we actually want you to do is go through the interview process for ROTC and have you go that route. And in my mind, it just made sense, right? I knew I wanted to go to college. I knew I wanted to go past a bachelor's degree. And I knew that that came with a tremendous amount of financial debt that I didn't want. So in my mind, I was like, go through this, get all your education done. And I mean, what a freaking enlightened thought for like an 18-year-old. I was like, I'm going to get out of the military and I'll have this awesome resume, all this job experience, all my education that will be paid for and a pension and healthcare. And then I'm good and I can go and do something else and still be, young by the time I'm out. So that was what I did. And I signed the enlistment contract with the ROTC separate contract the week after September 11th. So when I lead with that, people are like, because of September, right. No, it wasn't. I'm sorry. I don't want to burst bubbles, but here's a bubble burst. It wasn't because of September 11th. It was just very coincidental timing. And so I went in and I started college and started my ROTC classes, which were amazing. I really, in retrospect, now that I have some years on me, I'm going to be 27 until I die. But now that I have some years on me, I think that experience was invaluable. Like the leadership training, the experience as a whole, I think every single person could benefit from in one way or another. But anyways,
Right.
so I was doing my thing and going to college and, you know, being a productive citizen, as it were. And I went, so the way it kind of came down was in 2003, San Diego had a horrible round of brush fires, worse than arguably what we're experiencing right now. I mean, my family got evacuated. It was a train wreck. And we had a training exercise that got postponed. So January 2004, we're out on the training exercise. Um, and I ended up really crappy too, because I really liked rappelling and now I'm terrified of heights. It's fair. But I shattered, fractured, and dislocated my right foot fast roping. And the crazy thing about it, I actually have a picture of me maybe like 10 feet above the ground right before I got hurt. It was technically perfect. I landed perfectly. My form was on point. Everybody who was there, I mean, multiple witnesses, because everybody was there, said, no, that was perfect. Like, absolutely perfect. I must have just landed on a rock and the jungle boots didn't support the impact. And
Right.
my foot literally just imploded.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. And I would never like try to level up on somebody else's injuries. You know, your injury is your own and that experience
Right.
is your own. And there, I definitely feel in a lot of respects like there was maybe a bigger force saving me from something worse. You know, we were really heavy in Afghanistan at the time. A couple months later was when we invaded Iraq. And when all of that was going on and I was going through multiple surgeries and all the physical therapy, and it was terrifying on a personal level because I had to go through 3 doctors until I found one that knew how to fix what was wrong with me.
Oh, wow.
And that was a big benefit of being ROTC, was they gave me the flexibility to go and seek out civilian healthcare,
Right.
which was amazing because the Navy doc I saw at the Marine Corps, I got hurt on Camp Pendleton, which is a gigantic Marine Corps base. I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with that base. So I went to their old hospital because, again, 2004. And the first doc I saw was like, I don't know how to fix this, but I'll try. And I was like, I'm good.
Oh, right? It's like,
how about let's pass? So I ended up getting connected with this amazing civilian doctor, who is still my doctor for that. And the military does still pay for that injury. I am forever grateful for that. So I do want to like make that be very well known. They completely took care of me. They paid for my education, and they were beyond patient to see what the outcome of this injury would be. Because when it first happened, no one knew what my life would look like in a week, in a month, in 10 years, or whatever. It was straight up crisis mode. Like, let's find a doctor who knows how to fix her. And I got this really awesome doctor. And I mean, she should have been in the military. Can I just say, like, I remember her yelling at one of my cadre, who's a major at the time, to get scans. And he was maybe 30 minutes, no traffic south of where her office was located. And she went off on him. And I remember like sinking down into my chair and hiding my face like, oh my God, I would never talk to him like that.
right.
But she was just like, I don't give a fuck. Like,
Right.
we need these and we need these now. So for that, I'm eternally grateful because I got really well taken care of.
Sometimes we need that advocate as soldiers that sometimes is lacking in the military, right? Because sometimes we get into that, what do I almost want to say, almost like the another face in the crowd, almost like another enlistment, right? And you get these really caring doctors that like, oh my God, your foot, your whatever, you look at the extent of your injuries, like you don't get it. Like you're really effed up. And so, yeah, sometimes we need those people that put a fire underneath the other people's ass.
She definitely put a fire under his ass, but I am grateful for, because I did need that advocacy at that time. And I wonder, like on a personal level, because I've heard horror stories. It's like now for people coming home.
Right.
Because I think that sense of what you're talking about with somebody being a number is greater now than it was then when I got hurt. But anyways, multiple surgeries, a whole lot of physical therapy. And my doctor's goal the whole time was, we need to get your quality of life back in order. And at the time, I thought that meant I'll be good to go. I can go back into the military. I can fulfill my contract and do all the things. I didn't know that my expectation was different than hers, because her, professional knowledge obviously was extremely greater than mine.
Were you walking at this point, Lisa? Were you mobile? So you were in a wheelchair or with a walker or something?
So the first surgery, they used synthetic bone, cadaver bone, and some of my own bone marrow they essentially had to restructure my whole midfoot. So they had to remake bones. So I say my foot's tonic, but that's fine. So they put in an external fixator where the majority of the damage was, which is on the medial, so inside arch of my right foot. That was where the majority of the damage was. So they had an external fixator. And I will just say, I remember signing all that paperwork, but I was in so much pain and I was on so many drugs that I didn't conceptualize what external fixator meant until I was out of the first surgery and had metal coming out of my foot. And then was like, oh, that's what you're talking about. Because I didn't know.
Right.
So I had that surgery. And then I had the surgery to take all of the metal out of my foot. And then it was physical therapy, like physical therapy on physical therapy on physical therapy. So I did not walk or drive a car for the better part of a year.
Oh, wow.
I don't think I drove a car for over a year.
Wow.
So my doctor's goal was always, and she would tell me, like, what do you want your life to look like in a year? What do you want your life to look like in 10 years? What do you want your life to look like in 15 years? I was 19 when I got hurt. It was really, really young. So, do you want to be able to carry the weight of a pregnancy and have babies? Or do you want to be on bed rest the whole time? And it was very much like forward thinking that I wasn't ready for.
Right.
Because I was in this place of very intense grief. Everything that I thought that I had lined up in my life was gone. These were the days that were really what we know with the internet and stuff like that and social media. So staying connected to people was a lot harder. And that kind of out of sight, out of mind really did kick in. I think a lot of people as well didn't really know how to react to me or interact with me after the fact, because my life just went into a complete different place than theirs.
Do you feel that you got treated completely different after you got injured, almost like an invalid, like they almost felt sorry for you and were very like, oh.
Not everyone.
Okay.
Not everyone. I mean, my lieutenant colonel came and brought his family to my house and sat with me and talked with me, and he kept up with me and checked in with me and stuff like that. And like my core group did the same. I don't think anybody else knew what to do.
Sure.
I don't think that it was an intentional of like, we're going to treat her like an invalid. I think that they were so kind of overwhelmed. Like, you go into the military and there's this kind of like romantic badass sense to it. And my injury was a very real check for them.
Right.
In a lot of different ways. And I mean, let's be real, 18 to 23, you think you're invincible. And I very quickly proved that you're not.
Right.
So there was that.
Right.
And then it was just different life things. I'm having to learn how to walk and they're out doing their thing. And it was also, because ROTC, you can be a reservist and go into ROTC, as you very well know. A lot of the people who were reservists and were in my ROTC unit ended up activating and deploying. So everything was shifting. It was not just me. And I think that time was a big shift for everybody. There was so much transition that people kind of just went into their own thing, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And obviously, so I was just going to ask you too, like during ROTC or any type of training, there's a level of attrition. It might be slower. I don't know about ROTC, but sometimes when people fall off the radar, so to speak, whether it's due to injury or attrition, sometimes it's just like, hey, did you hear this? And it's like, but you got to keep going. Like you're in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're in the shit or whatever. And it's like, you can't stop because you're in it for you. You're not, yes, it's your buddy to the left and right of you. But if somebody falls back, like you still have a mission to complete, so yeah, I understand that as well. But it is a shock, isn't it? When you learn that somebody that you once knew be like, oh my God, she blew her what? Oh yeah, like she's learning to walk. And where other people are running probably 3, 4, or 5 miles
a
day, and you're just learning to re-walk.
I remember it must have been like post second surgery, and we would always have like a big end of the year, very formal dinner. And I ended up going. And it was the first time that a lot of people had seen me. And I think they were confused as to why I couldn't walk. A lot of people thought I had just broken my foot. So the fact that it's now like 4 or 5 months later and I'm still wheelchair bound and they don't understand why. I remember, again, I say I remember because a lot of this is really foggy because I was on a shitload of pain medication.
Okay.
Like 1,800 plus milligrams of Vicodin daily, in addition to like 600 to 800 milligrams of Tylenol. I mean, I didn't have a foot. It was very painful. So I remember going to that dinner and people just like looking at me and just being super confused by the whole thing. And there was our keynote speaker was an astronaut. And he was and I can't remember his name either, which is horrible. Because again,
that's all right.
And he was on the original moon landing.
Oh.
And he was fascinated by what happened. And I remember feeling just that visceral feeling of being really uncomfortable. Like I had to get out. I felt myself like closing in on myself. Like I'm not ready for this. I can't be around them. I still needed that space to work through my grief. And, in retrospect, I know that it was a lot of like confusion of why did this happen to me? And then people trying to make sense of it of like, well, something worse could have happened to you. Like, look at this. Now we're in Iraq. And it's like, no, I need to be doing my job. I need to be out there. I need to be with my people and be an active participant in this. And I can't. And like, now what do I do with myself? Like, how do I even get back into school? Very basic. And then being really pissed off. I mean, I was real mad for a very long time. Not at the Army at all. Just at the situation. So
you're trying to juggle all of this stuff, feeling kind of outside of what you used to be I can't even speak, is like basically woven into the fabric of the rest of your unit, right? Or your class. And now you're kind of outside of it, kind of limbo land, right? And now you're also on all these meds. Did all those meds end up causing some issues because of some pretty heavy duty stuff?
Luckily, no. I don't know. Everybody's experience in brain chemistry and all that is different. I got to the point where I was just like, I can't take this anymore. I can't be on these anymore. I don't like how I feel. It was like a feeling of ick. And I was kind of past feeling ick. So I started talking with my mom and my doctor about, I was at a point where I could wean myself off of them. And again, doctor, really great advocate. My parents also advocated their asses off for me. And I'm so grateful for that because I think the situation would be severely different had they not. And I was very safely weaned off of everything. so that I didn't go through withdrawals or anything like that. And I was able to stay off. Although I will say now, I can't take Vicodin for anything because it doesn't do anything.
Sure, your body's like, eh.
My body's like, meh, it's no big deal.
Right?
And we started exploring other methods of pain management. And I started going through like actual therapy
Right.
to get past stuff and my own emotional state at the time. Because again, I had a doctor drilling into me, like, what do you want your life to look like?
Mm-hmm.
How do you want things to be? You know, and she would always tell me, and I have actually all of my doctors, I have all my medical records. And if I read through them, like the stuff she tells me is the same stuff written there. She's, you know, you're 19 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. And we hope that it's a long life. What do you want that to be? And it just always rang true to me. So even, you know, getting to the point where I got past the injury and out of that like initial crisis mode and then out of that initial healing and coming out of it, that's how I looked at everything. I've been given this amazing second chance. My injury could have been a whole hell of a lot worse. I very much understand that, especially as people started coming home. It was like, holy shit, I've been given an opportunity. Now, what am I going to do with it? I have two options. I could like literally sit on my ass, be stuck in my feelings and not do anything, or I can do something. And it either is an action, but the action is up to me.
Right.
So I chose to take the action to give back.
Did you, through all of that adversity, did you ever deal with any, I guess, periods of, I know you talked about the emotion of anger, right? There was a lot of different things going on, but was there a lot of periods of like depression and trying to pull through that as well? And because this is, you know, really it's whether it's a physical trauma or emotional trauma, because you kind of have both, is now you're dealing with, you could really equate regardless of what caused it, whether it happens in theater or here at home, people can experience traumas in all kinds of ways.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And what I came to understand about trauma many years after the fact is that trauma is accumulative. You know, the bad things kind of compound on each other, which is insane to me, but also instinctually makes sense. So I think on a lot of levels, it's unrealistic to say like, oh, that thing happened to you and you're going to walk away unscathed. Mm-hmm. Maybe you feel like you're unscathed, but maybe like certain things have changed. And I know in the beginning, people really didn't understand because, again, amazing healthcare. If you meet me now, you would not think anything had happened to me. I don't walk with a limp. I don't walk with any kind of assistance. I refused getting a disability plate because I wanted to leave those spots for someone who I felt truly needed. I didn't feel like I did. And you can't, if you were to look at my foot, unless you were looking for it, you couldn't even see the deformity or the scars. Very talented doctor. Like I can't emphasize that enough. And so people had a really hard time, like they would want me to go do things that were very high impact that I knew I couldn't do, or walking for long periods or whatever, that in the beginning I couldn't do it. And even now, sometimes I still can't. And getting past that and not getting depressed from that was really hard. I know for me now, heights are like a no-go.
Okay.
I don't like heights. I can't get past it. I try. We were in Big Bear, which is like a ski resort out by us. My daughter and I were on a ski lift and the thing stopped at like the highest point, and she's 6 and she's like looking around and I'm like white knuckling the freaking, and this was 3 weeks ago, like white knuckling the bar, and like I could feel myself fighting off a panic attack. And it was still like, okay, this is my new reality. This is a very real thing for me. Okay.
So how do you mitigate that? How do you take those fears, those things that even through all the years, that you were able to kick and fight and scream because that's who you are at your core. Be like, I'm not going to let this define me and control my life, but yet there's residual stuff that's still there. How do you, how do you find a space that that you can continually go forward in?
I honestly went through a shitload of therapy to understand my trauma, to understand how it works in my body, even down to like the cellular level. Because there's new research coming out now that's saying that when you experience trauma, your cells actually change, like underneath a microscope. To understand all of that and to get techniques that worked for me, not anybody else, but for me, coping mechanisms that worked for me in my life. And then I had to get to the point where I was okay talking about what happened, because a lot of people were very confused. The ROTC element of me getting hurt threw them for a loop. It was like, well, you weren't active, like you weren't really in the military. And it was like, no, actually, I was. And I actually held my enlistment ID until I got married and got dependent ID. Like, no, I very much was in. And had I been able to, the agreement I had with the Army was, if you can recover from this and meet our physical standards, you can keep going. And I cannot run. I mean, caveat, if I'm being chased by a dinosaur, I will freaking run. But as a form of physical fitness,
right,
it is contraindicated for me to run if I want the quality of life that I want to have. So that aspect was really, really hard for a lot of people. And it was me having to figure out like how to reconcile everything in my mind while I was healing this physical trauma, and then going through like levels of grief, like the initial stage of grief right after I got hurt. And then, like a few months later, that other aspect of grief. But it wasn't until maybe 2 or 3 years after the initial injury that the Army actually said like, okay, no, you can't. Like we have to come to some sort of conclusion. You're out of this window of being hurt. You've done all the therapies, you've done all the things. You can't stay in. And then that was another level of grief. Like every time I thought it wrapped up, it started again.
Sure. I got to give it to you because you were saying earlier in the conversation, you were the first one that I've actually interviewed that has talked about trauma being at the cellular level within the body, and the body retaining that, right, into the cells and actually into the DNA, and it really actually changes, metamorphosizes, right? So I got to applaud you for that, because kudos on that, because I love hearing that. And I've interviewed a lot of people talking about trauma, people talking about the brain, the physical characteristics and everything, and the chemicals, but there's more to it.
Oh, for sure.
A lot of people, I think, deal with a lot, but yet the residual, they can't quite get to the core, why, what's going on, and because they're not addressing it as deep as it needs to go.
Right. And it's interesting that you were talking about like injury being like a defining element, or trauma being a defining element. And in retrospect now, and after launching my business and getting all these certifications, all this education and stuff, I realize my injury has defined me, but I've chosen how it's defined me.
Like that.
So there's always been this element of like, I had a tremendous amount of support to be able to empower myself to get better and get the kind of life that I want to have for myself. And that was a result of that injury. Being a young adult, learning how to walk again. My mom took me to college as a young adult so that I could continue going through my classes and graduate. Even all the certifications and the things that I did, like when I started with CrossFit it was like 2006, 2007 in San Diego, we had one gym. Now they are a dime a dozen. Greg Glassman came in and did my certification because there weren't that many boxes open. And working with first responders and working with military there, because that was who was predominantly seeking out that modality of fitness.
Right.
And letting this be, for me, like a launching pad of teaching people how they can empower themselves to feel better.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, since you mentioned the first responder and the military community, which obviously you're connected to and married to and been in. But more importantly, I want to talk to it about how now you, in the conversation, you talked about transitioning over to the healer now. You went through the healing, you become the healer. And so have you noticed a lot of not only your clients, but in the first responder and military communities looking at this platform of CrossFit and other, I guess, health outlets, kind of to help ease some of their traumas or find a healing in a sense?
Yes, but I don't know that that's always the surface level acknowledgement. I
Okay.
think that that's something that runs a little deeper, not for everybody. Some of the clients that I have come through, definitely they're like, I know exactly why I'm doing this. Other people, I think that what they're responding to is more of like, this is stress relief for me. This relieves my anxiety. This gives me energy, which I'm all for, like the neck below feelings.
Yep.
Get it. Because it is serving a bigger purpose.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, you're going to walk away with that feeling of like, I'm a badass, even if you didn't realize that you were going into it with that intention of needing that. And I think, given everything that I've seen happen, the people that I've trained and what they've seen, that aspect of self-care is a non-negotiable requirement for life. Mm. If they want that quality of life. And I think that they do.
Right. Very cool. So share with us a little bit too, as you gone on. How do you, you got so many good things going on, and I know COVID is, that's such a challenge, but how do you juggle? You're a military spouse, which is stressful in itself, but you're a busy mom and you're a busy entrepreneur, and you got, and you're helping train people. Like, how do you juggle it all?
Like 4 million calendar reminders.
Yeah, like California, Dean, if you figured out, let me know.
I'm like, how do I juggle it all? I try to plan stuff for when my kid's distance learning means she's actually in class. I don't know. I have a really great support system here that is tremendously helpful. I think that as a military spouse, I don't think I'd be able to survive without that. And that includes having a group of other military spouses that I trust, that I can rely on. And honestly, sometimes it literally is just taking things a day at a time and being able to be as flexible and as roll with the punches as I can. When COVID hit, the benefit that I had was that my business was already online. Mm-hmm. So moving all of that to a completely virtual platform was not that hard. It was a text to my clients, a big old group chat. And I said, I don't know how this is going to go. This might be a complete shit show, but what would you think about us doing Zoom training sessions? And they were like, whatever, let's give it a shot. So we gave it a shot. And it's evolved, obviously, since March, but we've kept it going. And you have to be adaptable to your environment. And that's what we've done. Right. And what I'm continuing to stress to them is, what do you want your quality of life to look like? Obviously, COVID, I think in the beginning was hard because people were like, oh my God, I'm stuck at home. Whereas I was like, I've done this before. So right. It wasn't that hard for me. But realizing that it was very different for most people. And being able to address that, and then being super grateful that I've spent all the money on all these certifications, because it was like, oh, we'll just train in a different way. Let's
There
just
you
do
go.
this. Let's just do this. Whatever. We just adapt and overcome.
How do you juggle it? How do you do it? And you're like, I don't know. Like you talk about, well, and you talk about the community, but also like what I really heard is like you keep it real. Like if it's not feasible, then you don't do it, or you try to adapt it to the situation, like today's interview, right?
Right.
And it's like, ooh, I got an hour between classes or whatever.
Now I'll have more time because she'll be in.
But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that for me, everybody's situation is different. All the people that I train, and I feel like me as a coach, because I've been through so much, I want to be as understanding and empathetic to the people around me. You know, they're going to feel safer stepping into a place of power and strength that might be very counterintuitive to them if they feel like they have the space to do that, where they can try it, they can fail, and it's not, you know, we just reassess and then move on.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years from now? Where do you see things going?
Still 27 for sure. I do see a podcast on the horizon. I do see a book at some point. That's maybe more of like the 10-year plan. When it comes to the training aspect, I will continue to train as long as my community feels like it's of value to them. If I can help them continue to grow strong, if I can serve my community, I will keep doing it.
And do people have to live in San Francisco in order to connect and work with you?
No. I've trained people. I had one client who, where was she? Out of Maryland, I think, and she was actually wheelchair bound due to a spinal cord injury. I've obviously trained a lot of people where I live in person. I've trained people all over, and it's all virtual. And really what it is, and it's kind of in some ways hard to like describe when I'm on social media or whatever. This isn't like a cookie cutter way of training. This is me assessing where you're at and tailoring this to your needs. And a lot of that goes back to all of the formal education and experience that I have the ability to do that. Instead of saying, I'm going to stick you in this bubble or whatever, I can put you into something that truly does work for you and for your life and for your schedule and all those things. Because at the end of the day, what kind of quality of life do you want?
Right.
And what that's done is, and I'm sure you saw that when you snooped my website, which I'm here for, is led me to be able to work with this amazingly diverse population. You know, spinal cord injuries, PTSD, nerve injuries, cancer, joint replacements, brain injuries, all kinds of stuff. And get people just feeling better. Because I really want people to know that this is a lifestyle that they can have.
Well, I think you just answered the next question that I was going to ask you. If somebody was watching this and going, and you know, whether they feel guided to work with you or not, whether they just started maybe a journey as a new mom or maybe wife or even their health, or maybe they're newly injured and they're feeling lost and they're listening or watching to this, what do you want them to know?
I want them to know that they're not alone. I think that was the biggest thing for me when I was getting past that injury, was so many aspects were changing, but I truly was not alone. And that feeling of support and community is what made me feel safe in taking steps forward to make myself feel better. And everybody's healthy living and healthy lifestyle is different. And that's awesome. But then it's a matter of figuring out what yours will be for you. I think having the support to be able to do that is invaluable.
Right. Let me ask you, Lisa, who is somebody that has inspired you, whether in the military or in your personal journey? It can be more than one.
Oh, man.
I ask all my guess this question? Somebody that you were like, yeah, I like what they're doing
I
or have done.
There's a few different, my grandma for sure, and then uh, my mom's godmother, more on like a female empowerment level because they
Sure.
were very, very ahead of their time in their personal lives. A big, my clients inspire me on a daily basis. I mean, I'm training them this morning and I'm sitting there going like, damn, you guys have come so far. We're so quick to discount our own efforts. And I continually remind them, like, remember how badass you are with this and how much you've learned in however many months since we've been online doing this. And then another really big component of people who have inspired me when I was working with domestic violence victims actively. So for a long time, fitness was like the side hustle. And I started working at the San Diego Family Justice Center, which is like a one-stop shop for victims of violence. And then I contracted with the Navy as an advocate. And I saw some very horrible things that people should never see. But the people that I worked with awed me. There's no other way to put it. And when you see someone literally in the worst situation of their lives and they get through that, I mean, I had clients come from that, industry, field, whatever, that time, come back to me 2 to 3 years later with, they have their own apartment, they have a job, and they're doing this and they're doing that and they're doing the thing. And, when I met them, they were in like straight up crisis mode, left their house with the clothes on their back. It's amazing. Like the resiliency of mankind to me is amazing.
Very cool. Very cool. Where can they find you, Lisa, if they're going to check out your website? Where can they go?
So the easiest place to find me is the website, which is www.ahealthfullife.org. I'm very active on Instagram, and my handle is my first and last name, Lisa Peranzo. And they both link back to one another. So I say that on every podcast. You can go onto the website. It's got the blog and the recipes and links to coaching, links to my workouts. And then if you go onto my bio on Instagram, it will link you back to the website and give you all the other things. What I will add in, because I am so appreciative to you for having me, for your listeners for listening, and for their service, that if someone is interested in coaching, but they're kind of hesitant, 2 things. First, I would say, reach out, email me, ask me, start a conversation. You literally have nothing to lose. Nothing. I'm always here for a good talk. And the other part is, if they are interested in coaching, I will offer them a discount if they say they listen to us talk. Because
Nice.
I'm beyond appreciative for their service, for them listening, taking the time out. Like, that's amazing to me.
All right. Well, that's a hell of an incentive for them. So, well, thank you so much. My guest today, Lisa Peranzo. Hey, look at that. I got it. Oh, hey, way to go, Dean. But thanks so much, Lisa, for being a guest today on the Red, White, and You show. It truly is a honor. And of course, obviously, thank you for your service, but thank you for what you continue to do for those that are in need and continually shining your light to those that kind of brighten their darkness.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was so fun.